For over 20 years, the Fire Store has equipped first responders with the best in firefighting gear. Discover seasonal savings on the gear you trust and visit thefirestore.com to shop everything but the truck.
I've been told by everybody up on this roof that they're all off the roof. I am on the roof of exposure 4. Fire through the roof of the 5 million, the entire rear section. Now remember, given the payday, has been accounted for. Okay. 610B, that was the payday. 610B.
I'm here. We got a fire. 1.5-story, single-family dwelling. Fire shown from the second floor. Give me a second alarm on this.
Bring up to the top floor. I got people hanging out the top floor windows with a baby.
Commercial building. A lot of fire, a lot of smoke. Go ahead and strike a third alarm on my orders on this.
Got people on the front fire escape here with windows centered below them. We need somebody up there.
Yeah, let them know we got a job. I'm pulling up now. Second alarm, I got a 1-story single-family frame. Heavy fire showing from the attic.
So we're using all hands. We got one line stretch, fire on the 4th floor. Second line being stretched. Primary searches are underway.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to our Fire Engineering Podcast at Command Post. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my best buddy and teach partner, Chief John Salka. And we've got another good, I think, a good topic for you. One that John and I buddy, we sit around the hotel lobbies and we're on the phone talking about this particular topic about as much as we talk tactics and strategy. So we'll get to that in a second. But FDIC is all lined out for us, folks. So just a reminder, if you're going to sign up for the pre-conference workshops, do it now. Our 5-alarm leadership 4-hour workshop on Monday, the seats fill up quick. And I always hate when people go, it's sold out. So make sure you sign up early and then come see us on Thursday, they gave the date. We'll be doing a breakout session, first time at FDIC, but working for a great chief. Actually, what a great lead-in for what we're going to talk about. Working for a chief who gets it. So many times people have said, what does it mean, to work for a chief who gets it, or working for a firefighter's fire chief. I think that's the topic we're going to roll with for FDIC, working for a firefighter's fire chief. And we sit back and we explain it. We're actually going to talk about that in a little bit. But so are we up to like 15 grandchildren now, or what are we up to in the Salka?
Yeah, we'll have 8 in February. Right now we got 6, and 2 more on the way. So we should have 8 in February. And we just recently celebrated James Jr.'s second birthday. So we had fun with that, and that's it. Holidays rolling around and everything else coming up. So it'll be fun.
Oh, you know what? I say this all the time to you. We all love our children. You and I love our children more than life itself. But the grandkids, I never understood it. I would listen to you talk about your first grandchild, and you would be, oh my God. I'm like, and then Brinley came into my life, and I know exactly what you're talking about now. Oh my God. I never thought I could love something so much that it'd make my heart hurt like it does. God, I love her. But actually, the other day, John, they where I'm interim fire chief in Lucas, Texas, great fire department. But they came out for a visit again, and it's wonderful. So
nice.
Hey, so anyway, let's jump into this. We've got I'll call it a new program, but it's something we've talked about for a long time. New one for FDIC, titled The Firefighter's Fire Chief. And again, to our viewers, or if you're listening to this while you're driving, I'll say it again. We have so many people come up to us in our classes and they go, so Chief Salka, I've heard Chief Lasky say you're a firefighter's fire chief. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a firefighter's fire chief? I mean, or how do I get there? I'm a chief. When you're talking about that, I'd like to be one of those one day that guys go, you know what? He or she's that dude, she's a firefighter's fire chief, that kind of stuff. Which ties us to maybe working for a great boss. You could call it the same thing. Maybe we want to call that the title of this class or this podcast, working for a great boss, AKA a firefighter's fire chief. But let's talk about that, John. We've seen guys and gals who get it, and we've seen those that don't. We've seen people that move up the chain for the wrong reasons, and those that move up for the right reasons. We've seen the people that get in there and their egos run amok and they forgot where they came from. But let's just jump into you first about that whole thought of working for a great boss, or it could be a company officer, like we said, a firefighter's fire chief, but it could be a lieutenant or captain or battalion chief or whatever. Let's start off with you. Your thoughts on working for a great boss.
And the funny thing about this is, and I like you already said, you and I, and we, the bigger group of you and I, our friends and the people that we work with and teach with and travel with and hang out with. I mean, the topic is really so big. There's so many different definitions. There's so many different types of people, so many different types of bosses. There's so many different types of fire departments that there is no one answer. There is no one answer. What's a good boss? You know what I'm saying? Like, because, and as you and I know, we've dealt with, you've written about it and I've written about it in my articles. Sometimes a tough boss is a great boss to work for. Sometimes a fun boss is a great boss to work for. There's no one definition. I can't say I can tell you what my favorite was, because I've worked with some great, and I use Pete Lund all the time. Pete Lund's a great example. Pete Lund was a great boss. He was a great lieutenant. He was a great rescue officer, great FDNY guy. And you could never call Pete Lund a tough boss. You just couldn't call him a tough boss. He wasn't. Because I worked for other bosses, other officers that were down and dirty, tough bosses. Not negative, not bad, not, oh shit, you got to work for that guy. Absolutely not. Great bosses to work for. But Pete Lund, you couldn't call Pete Lund a tough boss. Not on the toughest day of his life. You couldn't call him a tough boss. He was a great guy. He was happy. He loved the fire service. He was into it. He loved training. Working with him was always a pleasure. I used to say that, pulling up to the firehouse, I'd see his car parked there. I'd be like, Yahoo, this is great. I can't believe Pete's working tonight. Unexpectedly maybe working a mutual or working a shift for the boss that I thought was going to be working that night, And yet I worked for some other bosses that were, and I can't call Charlie Kipp. Charlie Kipp was one of my lieutenants in 11th Rock back when I was a young fireman, and a very young fireman, first couple of years on the job. And Charlie Kipp was a pretty tough boss. He wasn't a tough boss like, that he had a lot of high requirements for you to do and things that you couldn't get done or things that he was always looking for. But he was just, he wasn't the happy-go-lucky boss that was kidding around all the time. Sometimes he was, but not too much. And, and you've got stories about your bosses as well. And I've told that story 1,000 times about the toughest boss in the house, the guy from 45 Truck when I was in Rescue 3. That was just a tough old bird, And now listen, I'm 67 years old today. Well, not today, but recently my 46th anniversary of getting appointed to the FDNY in November. It was 46th anniversary. 46 years ago, I got appointed to the FDNY, on or about. And,
and you're still going to fires. You're still going to fires with your volley department.
But if you look back 46 years ago, 46 years ago, there were a lot of guys, Vietnam veterans, and even probably some World War II veterans were still company officers back then. Older guys, maybe chief officers and stuff. And that was just, I think there was a greater number. There was a larger number of tough bosses back then. Tough, old-fashioned, just total line kind of bosses. And I'll tell you what, I enjoyed it. I was a young guy in a job, and it helped form me into the guy that I am. And it helped me realize what kind of a place I wanted to work in, or maybe if I was ever a boss, maybe what kind of a boss I would be, or what kind of things I would pay attention to if I was a boss. So I know I'm running circles around this question and not answering it, but everybody's got their preferences. Everybody's got their, now what kind of bosses are the most effective, are the best bosses? Again, it's the same answer. I've worked with bosses that, like Pete Lund. Pete Lund's just a perfect example. You could never call him a tough boss, but he was a great boss. He was one of 4 good lieutenants, 3 good lieutenants and a captain.
But John, let me interrupt you for a second, though. And you said that twice, right? And you've said it before, where Pete Lund wasn't what you would call a tough boss. Like we talked about the tough bosses before. I didn't say asshole bosses. I said the tough bosses. But Pete, I agree with you, but at the same time, I'm like, I may not refer to him as tough, but man, when he said bing, 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 rescue's gone out for training, or bing, bing, he was the kind of boss that would be like Bill Allen, my lieutenant Bill Allen. I'll talk about a little bit. Bill was not what I would call a tough boss, I've said this before, I was never scared of him. I was scared of disappointing him. I wanted to be like that golden retriever puppy, man. I want to be the one he calls first. You know what I'm saying? And I've heard you talk so many stories about Pete, and I always ask you in class, especially company, I always can't talk about Pete Lund. So I get what you're saying. He's not he's not what you would call a tough boss like that one that's, but for our viewers, when John says that, he's not talking about, it wasn't like a walk in the park and all this, and we just did whatever we wanted.
no.
He was the boss, and you knew it, and you trained, and you did your stuff. He just wasn't as loud about it, maybe, right?
Right. He wasn't as old fashioned. He wasn't sort of like the old. You couldn't really call Pete Lund old school. Maybe now again, if you look back at Pete Lund back then, it was old school. But back in the day when I was with Pete Lund, you couldn't call him old school. But there were bosses that existed at the exact same time, the exact same years that I was there with him, that were old school bosses. And there was no small talk, no talking about the Yankees in the kitchen or anything like that. We're pretty much job talk and what we're getting done and what we're not getting done. And, boom, they'd be up after lunch, back up to the office doing what they're doing. All right, we're going to drill at 2:00, guys. Make sure you're ready. And he'd disappear. And, 5 to 2, he'd come down with the book in his hand, or training book or a tool or whatever it was he's going to do. And I just feel fortunate that I recognize each of these different kinds of bosses, all as good bosses. Not that I didn't ever work for a shitty boss, because I have, and you have. Sometimes it was just a guy covering a vacation. Sometimes it was just a lieutenant or a captain that was filling in the spot that I was working in the firehouse where I was a firefighter. And you're like, wow, this guy you don't do much, huh? You barely get him to get on the rig, like he's the last guy on the rig for every run. And unless you ask, you might not get a drill. Wasn't a nasty guy or a really rude guy or anything like that, but just not into the job, a crappy boss. And then you work with some boss that were into the job or old school. Some guys were into the job and they were volleys on the outside and they were more friendly and more like the firefighters, So I guess if you had to put a label on it, what's the best kind of boss? I want a boss that's into the job, that's into what we do, that the job comes first, right? The mission, the man and me. We talk about that all the time. It's the title of a book. It's a great book. It's a military title. It's a military book, but it really applies to us very, very closely. The mission, the men, and me. And those are the 3 things you should be worrying about at work as a firefighter or an officer. But officers get to apply the priorities to everything, right? And it's the mission, the men, and me. The mission comes first. Fighting fires, saving lives, going on runs, doing our job. That comes first. Maybe we're not going to get the shower today. Maybe we're not going to get the drill. Maybe we're not going to get to eat today, but we're going to get the job done. And then if there's more time, maybe we're going to get to eat, and then, so it's the mission, the men and me. And you got to know that the men come next. If you're a good boss, you take care of the mission first, and then you take care of your people second, and whatever time or energy or hot water is left over, that's what you get. And people should know that too before they start studying or interviewing or promoting, that you go farther back in the line when you get promoted. Your personal priorities, your personal needs come after the needs of your people. You got to take care of your people.
And John, you and I have met literally thousands of firefighters on the road teaching and everything else, or whatever. And I'd venture to say, I think you agree with me. We've talked about this before. This goes back to the whole the competitiveness we like to appeal to in firefighters. Nobody wants to be last due. Nobody wants to be thought of last. Firefighters are very competitive, not in a bad way, not in a silly way, but they want to be thought of first, pick first. They want to be part of the best company. That's the logos. Nobody wants to wear the t-shirt. You heard me say before, we suck less than them. Everybody wants to be part of that great company, whatever. And I think that's part of it with a Pete Lund or with me and Bill Allen was, when you walk in, you go, oh God, this is, first of all, he's dressed like a slob. He acts like a slob. He doesn't train. He's so, you're like, oh, this is almost embarrassing that we're going to go somewhere and this is my boss. So I think it goes back to, and our hearts go out to those that have to work actually for that boss. Granted, they're few and far between, but you still may have to work for that person. And then you get to work for that dream boss, the one that, look, they hold you. They hold you accountable. You're going to train. You're going to wear a uniform. You're going to show up early. You're going to be. You're going to take care of business. Take care of your tools. You're going to go off the rig ready to do battle and all that stuff. But people line up behind them to work. I've always been one of those people that says, "Hey, if you ever get a chance, man, you got to go work Salka's shift on B shift. He's the lieutenant. That's. I'll talk about Brian Salka, Lieutenant Goose Creek, man. They go home, they tell their spouse, "Babe, if I get transferred, I want to go to his ship." The guy trains all the time. I mean, not just what we're doing on the calendar. The other day, he had his guys out doing this and this, and he sat down and kind of like takes you off guard when you're sitting down and have a cup of coffee, and he leans over and he goes, "John, tell me about Colleen. How's Colleen doing? She doing good? How's Maureen doing? How's your?" All of a sudden now, my boss is talking about my family. She takes an interest in my family as much as my fire service abilities, my firefighter abilities. And I think that rounds things out a little bit. John, it's one thing to be the great boss that is dialed in at work and is doing everything and is training you all the time. I'll bring up Ray Downey. You said it before, and I've said it. Ray Downey, they talk openly about it. He was called God, not to his face, but he was like, he created USAR. He could be a tough boss. But you said it, John. What, several hundred guys in SOC that work for him. He could walk into any of those rescue firehouses, the Marine, and go, Andy, how's your dad doing? Didn't he have a heart attack? Is he recovered? I mean, and sometimes it almost make you go, how the hell does he do that? Well, right. Because he makes it a priority to be not just the boss on the fire stuff, but to be the mentor, to be the leader that is concerned as much about your family as about you being a good firefighter.
And you know who else was like that? And I have to mention his name because he passed away recently. Was Jimmy Murtaugh.
Oh, yeah.
Jimmy Murtaugh. I only knew him as a deputy. Now, he, believe it or not, he was a former captain of 48 Engine also, where I was a captain, years after him. After him was I'm trying to remember the exact sequence. And then Nick, and then myself. But anyway, but I never knew Jimmy Murtaugh as the captain of 40 Engine. I knew him as a deputy after I didn't even know him when I was a fireman. I didn't even really know him when I was lieutenant, because I was lieutenant in Brooklyn, Squad 1. But I made captain. I went up to the Bronx, and I met Jimmy Murtaugh. And he was a deputy in the 7th Division, and he was around. He made it to a couple of different places. But, he passed away recently. And, of course, it's on Facebook. And as, so sorry to announce the passing of, former deputy Division 7 and, Jimmy Murtaugh. And then guys start commenting. You had to see the heartfelt comments of guys, firemen, lieutenants, other chief officers saying, and so many of them said similar things. Not that they were copying after each other. Everybody's writing stuff right out of their heart. But I was like, gee, one of the nicest guys. And I wrote that. I think I wrote one of the nicest and most professional officers in the FDNY. I don't know what more you could write besides that. One of the nicest and most professional. And that covers both sides of the coin. Nicest meaning when you worked with the guy, he was friendly. He was always very soft-spoken. How's everything going with your family? Good. Hey, did I see you pull up in a new truck? Boy, I didn't know you mentioned that last time. You got it, huh?
I didn't know you were making that much money, Salka.
Yeah, right. But most professional too. Jimmy Murtaugh was, I don't want to call him a genius because it almost sounds geeky, but he was a very, very exceptionally bright guy, knew the books, knew the job, knew his job, and wouldn't hesitate to talk about it, wouldn't hesitate to jump in on a drill or a discussion or something like that. And in that way, he wasn't a stern boss, but he was a tough boss in that way because he knew it all. You couldn't say, yeah, well, we were going to stretch around over here. No, that's not what the SOPs call for. The SOPs call for the first line to be here, second line to be there, et cetera, et cetera. But boy, oh boy, what a great boss! And I feel fortunate that I was able to work with him, even in a limited capacity, being a captain, and then later being a battalion chief. And he really poured himself into me. He really, anytime we were together, I'd walk in the office, I'd see him in the downstairs in the kitchen, and he'd come say, how's the studying going? Good. You're doing fire tech, right? Yeah. And he'd say, yeah, just remember, this is a tough part, and this is a tough part. They're probably going to get a couple of questions on this or on that. Jimmy was historical and well known for coming out on top of all his lists. He actually came out very close to the top of more than one or two chief of department tests. He took chief of department a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken, and I hate to be mistaken, but I think he was number one and number two on a couple of tests. They never did pick him, they never did choose him, and I don't know why. Because not only did he have the brains, not only did he have the job knowledge, he even looked like he had the bearing, he had the appearance of a senior fire officer. He was just he would have been such a great chief of department, and they never did pick him. He was never sour on it. He was never angry about it. He became staff. He did take a staff job. He had 3 stripes. He was a 2-star chief out in I think Division 15. It doesn't matter. He ended up going back to deputy before he retired, if I remember correctly. And just a great guy. Boy, a guy I really enjoyed working with, and I was really saddened when I heard about him passing away. Unfortunately, I'm getting close to 70 now. I'm 67 years old. I was a 21-year-old man when I got on a job. And when I made lieutenant, I was 30. And when I made captain, I was not even 40. And all the people that were my bosses back then, the people that were captains and battalion chiefs and deputies, were all at the prime of their lives and the prime of their careers. They were all 51, 52, 53-year-old men, that were up in the ranks now and leading the job. And now they're all 80-something, and they're all slowly slipping away,
So
and
John,
it's sad.
John, to kind of continue on that end of things, a lot of young firefighters. Let me go back in time. I remember when I was working for Bill Allen. You've heard me talk about the absolute dream company. Unfortunately, when you're young, you don't even realize you're working for a great boss. Sometimes you're just bumbling around, being a firefighter, enjoying life, showing up, and this. And I never realized till later in life how incredible he was, how absolutely incredible he was. But I remember working a couple times another shift, John, and I'm like, I go over there, I'm like, wow, this is awesome. They're not breathing out their neck to train. They're not doing this. They're not doing that. Guys should show up because it was kind of when you say laissez-faire, I'm talking. It was kind of just
like a vacation day.
Yeah, and I'm like, God, this would be so cool to work this. I'm got my roofing company. I'm playing ball. I'm doing this. I could just come in and hang out and do my thing. Go to and I tell you, I ended up later on getting transferred to that shift for this one officer. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I couldn't wait to get back off of that because I miss the regimented training. I missed having a boss who held me accountable, but he could have that conversation with me he would have that, Rick, come here. Like I've said, my entire life, I had Lasky, you're a dumbass. I've heard it so many times. I could have that, and he would get done with that, and then say, when's your little boy Ricky coming up here again? I remember we were over near Midway Airport. Our central station was right on the border of Chicago, right? We had Engine 127's house from Chicago, half a block one way, the old firehouse, and ours. We weren't in the city, but we're next to it. And I remember my boy when he was little, when he was little, he'd come over, and I'm like, where's he at? And I hear the ladder pull up or start up. We had a ladder engine ambulance at the station. He's got him on his lap, and he pulls the rig out, and my son is sitting on his lap, backing in, steering the ladder truck. I know you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that nowadays. I'm just saying, Bill cared as much about my family as he did me. So he could go from give me a what for and a good loud coaching lesson to taking care of my son. He didn't confuse. A lot of guys can't separate that. They're like, they think, they're just like this. And then they see your kids, how you doing? And they don't know how to, I guess, walk both sides of that.
Right. And that other point that you made is a great one. And I know it's true too. And I think our listeners could maybe take a piece of advice from this is, when we were young firefighters, I'm the same thing. I talk about bosses now, like Joe Callan and others. That's when I was an older guy. I was a captain when I met him. But even when I was a young man, when I had some great bosses, like Jack Doherty was my captain in 11 truck when I was a fireman down there. And what a great boss. And Jack Doherty's still alive. He lives down in Florida. One of these days, we're going to go down to they have an annual reunion down in Florida every year. Jay Jonas goes down because he was in 11 truck years after me as a lieutenant, though. And he goes down, and I haven't been there, but I'm going to make it a case to get down there one of these years. And, Jack Doherty's down there, and I'll get a chance to tell a guy that I absolutely loved working for that I never said a word to. I never said a word to him about, God, I love working for you. You're such a great captain, And there's probably a lot of guys listening right now that work in firehouses, probably work with good or great bosses and may have never said it. And even if you don't say it, appreciate it, man. And when you learn it is when you do what you did. You go visit a buddy of yours. You're off duty. You go visit your buddy who's working today. Stop by the firehouse today. I'm over at Engine 1. Okay. And you go over there, and he's there. How you doing? Good. What's going on? Oh, this is my lieutenant, Tommy Winkler. How you doing, Lou? Good, And oh, you're the boss here in Engine One? Yeah, I've been here for like 5 years. It's a great place. You say, and you talk to him and he says, oh, my boss is such a great guy. Or the opposite. You're like, you're there for 10 minutes with your friend. You're like, who's your boss? It's this lieutenant. He's upstairs. He comes in, he does roll call. He sits upstairs all day long till we get a run. Some days he doesn't even have lunch with us. He's not a bad guy at fires, but the rest of the time he's sort of like invisible. And the guy thinks everybody's boss is like that. And then he comes to visit you one day, and your boss is hanging out in the kitchen with everybody and talking about stuff and saying, hey, Rick, remember that job we had the last set of tours? Yeah, Rick and I had a great top floor job. And he's talking to your buddy. He's probably talking to him, using more words with him than his own boss does when he's working at the firehouse. So for anybody who's listening, have a great appreciation. At least appreciate the quality of the bosses that you work with. Certainly if you're working for good bosses. And every boss is not Pete Lund. Every boss is not a great boss, but there's plenty of good, solid bosses out there. Good guys and gals, people that worked hard as firefighters and made lieutenant or captain or whatever your first rank is out there that rides the front seat. And be appreciative of that, because someday you'll find yourself somewhere else and say, wow, man, I wish I was back with Lieutenant Winkler. He was, he wasn't my favorite boss, but man, he beats these guys to death,
Oh, exactly. And that's kind of where I was going with, with that whole, sometimes, you and I talked about this years ago about, I really tried hard several years back to remember to thank my mentors when I saw them, because so many of them are gone now and I never got to say thank you. So I remember doing Tom Freeman. You're just to say, I would be where I'm at. You and I have said this openly. You and I unapologetically will tell people, John Salka and Rick Lasky, where we're at today because of about 10,000 other people. About 10,000 other people that touched our lives, mentors, people, friends, people that cared. Nobody gets to the summit by themselves. What I'm saying? Everybody has somebody. Over all the years, look at Pride and Ownership. I talk about Chief Jack McCassin, Big Mac, decorated combat Vietnam vet Marine. The guy could have you sitting on the edge of your seat in a fire behavior building construction class, this gigantic football player of a guy, and yet his command presence was unbelievable. Then Eddie Enright's love for the job and his guys and his calmness, and nothing shook him. Stuff could be blown up around him. Everything else from Chicago. Mac was from Oak Lawn originally, and then Tom Freeman, the Rain Man. I mean, I got a picture of him, John. I think I've showed you. We had a good job. We had a good fire. And I got both my Emily and Ricky are little. And it's in his town, it's in his district, multiple station department. And things are winding out. It's over with. They're mopping up. And he steps out of the command rig and he grabs my daughter and he puts her over his shoulders for a picture. I have my camera over. He's at the command post like this with my daughter. And she's like, like this. And then he puts, I don't know how some of these guys, they're just so wonderful they're running a job and they're like, Ray Hoff used to do it. When Ray was in the 4th Battalion as a battalion chief, my little boy, Ricky, would be there with his leather helmet, his coat, with his little truckman's belt and his boots. I'd get bumped in the back seat of the buggy, John. My son sat in the front seat working the siren for Ray. I remember Ray's in the street at a fire. My kid's standing there. It's like Emily, in the Bronx with you. There she is with Uncle John standing in the street, just looking up. I'm just being able to strike that balance. Being a great boss doesn't always necessarily mean how good they are out on a call, how good they are at taking care of stuff in the firehouse. That's all important. Don't get me wrong. That's what we hired you for.
Absolutely.
I think it's the one that knows how to work all ends of it. You know what I'm saying? Work all ends of, Tommy Schervino, God love Tommy, watching students hang on his every word, this chief. I mean, just the enthusiasm and how much he loved and adored his daughters. I mean, it just, and we've said this before, the greatest bosses you and I have ever, the greatest leaders we've ever studied, from Colin Powell to Pete Lund to Bill Allen, all of them, they were able to do two things without hesitation: make the difficult decision, have the hard conversation with people, but they all valued family. Every serious. I've actually challenged myself, John. Now, when we're talking about great leaders, to go, I start looking at their bio. First thing you read about, their family, their kids, what they did with this, and so on and so forth. And if they treat their family that well, they're going to treat you that well.
Right.
And I don't think you can be any kind of a great leader if you don't have family values somewhere intertwined in your makeup. Otherwise, you're a robot. And I don't know how you can take care of your people and have empathy and understand that John Salka's coming in because he's exhausted because the new baby's got colic, and they kept
And it just goes to show you, there's so many different kinds of bosses. And that's another thing that you and I bring up on our company officer academy when we teach that class. We teach it all over the country to volunteers and paid guys and big classes and little classes, all the way out on the West Coast in the middle of the country. And one of the things we talk about all the time is how many different kinds of bosses there are. And I used a couple of examples of some places in the Bronx that I know about, not necessarily that I ever even worked there, but like about it. And you say, we don't have the FDNY doesn't have like what a lot of other people have. We don't have the A, B, C, D shift or the 1, 2, 3, 4 shift. We have this other group chart that's a little bit convoluted. It's a little bit mixed up, and guys move around on it a little bit. So you don't necessarily work with the same 3 or 4 or 5 guys every time you come to work. But anyway, there are 4 officers in every company. There's a captain and 3 lieutenants. So there is some form of 4 shifts. And sometimes those 4 officers are so different from each other, but they're all officers in this great engine company or this great truck company. And it's great every day. It's great every day. And the chiefs love the place. They don't hesitate using them. They love putting them to work and everything else. Yet, like one of them is an old school World War II veteran or Vietnam veteran or, Afghan veteran. And he's just an all business kind of a guy, not a real friendly guy, not the kind of guy that guys like really make friends with or get invited to his house or vice versa. But they love working with him, and he cracks the whip a lot, and he wants everything just the way he wants it, not a little bit off, not a little bit left, not a little bit right. And then there's another boss that's an easygoing guy that went to college and he's got a degree in whatever he's got a degree in, and he's just a really friendly guy, but he's into it. And you could actually go through 4 shifts and identify the 4 different officers as dramatically different from each other. Yet every one of the crews, every one of the groups of guys that work with them loved them and would follow them anywhere. And it's not one mode. It's not one model,
Isn't it what you talk about? And we actually have a slide. It's actually in our 5-alarm leadership book from the firehouse to the fire ground. There's an actual slide about doing it your way. I talked about when I first made officer, I thought they wanted me to imitate Jack McCaslin, Eddie Enright, Tom Freeman, Tommy Schiavone, Ray Hoff. They wanted me to be Rick and take those great attributes from those bosses and plant them on me. But you just mentioned, you look at one, they all are different. It's like I always see that phrase, 52 and 25 are the same, but they're different. It's about, you used to talk about growing your sea legs. It's about figuring out where you're at. Every boss is the same, but they're different. They enforce and follow the same rules, if you will, and SOGs, and within the department, they wear the same uniform, but they may have a different leadership style. And you know what? It all works. And real quick, we talked about it. We talked about that before, John, right? So who here's got a sibling? Who's got a sister, brother, right? Do they have kids? Okay. Do they raise their kids? Do they raise your kids the same way that you raise your kids? And you go, no. Do their kids turn out okay? All kidding aside, yes. 2 different parenting styles. And so there's 2 different leadership styles, and off you go,
Absolutely. And like you said, the SOPs and the tactics, those are the same because that's what the job demands. The job demands, the SOPs for that fire department. But everybody's got a different history. Everybody grew up everybody was a probie in a different place and was a lieutenant in a different place before they made captain or whatever rank they're at. So everybody has all these different histories, but they all end up in this one place together. And even though one guy, and we see it in the Bronx once in a while, you get a guy from Brooklyn. Get a guy that was a fireman, a lieutenant in Brooklyn, comes up to the Bronx to be a captain. Everybody's like, oh, we got a Brooklyn guy. We got a Brooklyn guy. But they turn out to be great guys because they're into the job and they love the job. And maybe they used to do things a little different in Brooklyn than we do it in the Bronx, but everything comes out in a wash, so that's good.
Well, like I said, we for our viewers, our listeners, John and I, there's times, like I said, we never have a script for this or Hump Day Hangouts, but we have an idea. And there are things we want to talk about, folks, that are like, usually, I think, John, I could say this for both of us. What we talk about sometimes our show is usually a result of a bunch of questions we get from students, attendees in class, where they go, like I started off this whole program with, so what does it mean to be a firefighter chief? What does it mean to work for a great boss? Are you talking about the one that lets you get away with murder and the one that doesn't care and the one you can screw off and all that? Actually, that's quite the opposite of what we're talking about. I'll finish up with this and then ask you for your closing comments. I'll go back to, I think the greatest boss is the one that can work both sides of the wall. They can be that great boss, that motivator, that pushes you, inspires you, and appeals to your competitiveness on the fire side. Yet they know your family. They talk to you about, they make sure what's going on the other side, which firefighters have a whole life, not just the firehouse.
Right.
I think those that are able to balance those, I can't tell me a conversation. I've been to firehouse, and I'll pick on you. In the Bronx, sitting in the 18th Battalion with 45 and 58, and the guys at the table are talking about family and they're the kids and the Yankees and stuff, and it's just, and you're like, and then it'll turn into a tactics. Let me talk about the job they had over in Battalion 19, the 19th Battalion. Then they're back to talking about someone's kid that just did, those are some of the greatest experiences I've personally experienced in my career, John, is those that know how to strike the balance between the job and the family. We can spend.
Like I said earlier, my final thought is just be yourself. Being yourself is so easy. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to plan. You don't have to, put pieces together to figure out what to do next. If you're just yourself, I mean, that's the easiest way to be. And people are I think if you're a decent guy or a decent gal, if you're a decent person, if you treat people decently, which no matter what kind of boss you are, that's a mandatory thing, right? That's mandatory. You got to be able to treat people decently, not cuddle with everybody.
Right.
As long as you treat people decently, then whatever else you do is good. Then if you're just one of them hard-nosed guys that want stuff done on the button, on the time, completely right, we're going to drill from 1 to 2, and you don't quit at 5 to 2, you quit at 2, and you drive them a little bit harder maybe than some other people. Hey, who watched the rig today? Let's watch it again. Let's do it right the second time. As long as you treat people decently, even if you're a little bit hard, rough around the edges on some other stuff, most of the time it goes unnoticed.
Exactly. And like I said, it's not about giving away the store and being that nobody wants. I'll be honest with you. Trust me, folks. You don't want to work for one of the lieutenants I worked for that I thought he ended up being a buffoon. I mean, we went from being number 1 pick to be number 3.
You got to remember, it's a job. It's a job. It's a job. You're not at somebody's picnic. You're not volunteering somewhere, not as a volunteer firefighter. I mean, you're not volunteering at the Red Cross or working at the church picnic. You're at a job, whether you're a volunteer firefighter or a career firefighter. You're at a firehouse to get a job done. You're on a run. You're on a call to get a job done, to help some people. That's what you got to get done. Results matter. Results matter.
Exactly. We've said this before. Well, guys, this show wasn't about what qualifications you need to be that great boss. It was what traits, what actions you take to be that great boss. So obviously we want you to know your job, do what you have to do, be a student of the game, continue to learn, but know how to absorb those two things together. Take care of your people, make the right decision because they're right, not because they're popular. Don't be afraid to coach loud once in a while. Don't be afraid, be the mentor, be the one that makes a difference. Sometimes the loudest mouth in your firehouse is screaming to be led the most. It's easy to lead the fun guys and the guys that are into it. Sometimes the problem child, aka the leadership challenge, is the one that's screaming at you to be the boss the most. So pull it all together. Hopefully we'll get to see some of our classes. We talk about this stuff a lot. Like I said, this is a result of we got a class at FDIC working for working for a firefighter's fire chief. That's a result of people asking that question. So, hey, John, if they want to get a hold of you, best email.
ChiefJohnSalka@gmail.com.
And I'm Chief Lasky at gmail.com. And if you want to work for a great fire department, come to Lucas, Texas, man. I'm telling you, this place is, we're hiring right now. This whole area has grown. So come work with us. There's great bosses here. There's great firefighters. I'm telling you, my wife scared me, John. She says it's like you're working with the children in the corn, if you remember that movie, because she's waiting for all of a sudden, I'm going to go out to my Chiefs car and there's going to be candles all lit up on the floor and there are people with hoods and stuff like that, coming after me like they're worshiping and stuff like that, that whole child. No, this is a great place. We've been having a ball. So, hey, we end all of our shows with two very important statements, folks. Please keep the men and women armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And remember this, never forgetting means never forgetting. Be safe. God bless you. We'll see you next time.
For over 20 years, the Fire Store has equipped first responders with the best in firefighting gear. Discover seasonal savings on the gear you trust and visit thefirestore.com to shop everything but the truck.
Oh my this roof that they're all off the roof. I am on the roof of exposure 4. Got fire through the roof of the 5 million in the entire rear section. Now remember, given the payday, has it been accounted for? Okay. 610B, that was the day date, 610B.
I'm here. We got a fire. 1.5-story, single-family dwelling. Fire shown from the second floor. Give me a second alarm on this.
Bring up to the top floor. I got people hanging out the top floor windows with a baby.
Commercial building. A lot of fire, a lot of smoke. Go ahead and strike a third alarm on my orders on this.
Got people on the front fire escape here with windows centered below them. We need somebody up there.
Yeah, let them know we got a job. I'm pulling up now. Second alarm, I got a 1-story single-family frame. Heavy fire showing from the attic.
So we're using all hands. We got one line stretch, fire on the 4th floor. Second line being stretched. Primary switches are under.